My spiritual awakening started taking place when I was at one of the lowest mental health places I've probably ever been. I was, I think, 14 or 15 years old. I had really low self esteem. I was insecure about a lot, just about existence within itself, but it was in that really low place mentally and emotionally that my awakening began. And the only reason I put awakening in quotation marks is because I don't really see it as an awakening process, but rather a remembrance process. And I think that applies to everyone. It's just you're remembering. You're remembering yourself. You're remembering why you came here. That's what I really think the spiritual awakening process is. So I'll call it awakening for the remainder of this video, but side note. Um, so yeah, it was at that really low place in my life that this spiritual awakening started to happen. And it happened at a very rapid and confusing pace. So just imagine this really insecure teenager with different mental health issues that I hadn't quite yet come to an understanding of. And I'm having all of these experiences, these supernatural experiences, these really synchronistic experiences, and I'm starting to put two and two together, but things are still very chaotic internally. So it's like you're having this, you know, transcending awakening that's taking place, but you're also just in this really rough place mentally. And I won't go into too many details about the rest of my spiritual awakening. I guess that can be like a separate video to go into all the details about that. But I really want this video to focus on mental health and spirituality because I feel like I've been immersed in the spiritual community for a very long time. Since I was 15, I'm currently 21. So I feel like I've seen a lot in the context of mental health in the spiritual community that I don't necessarily agree with. And it's coming from the perspective of someone who has experienced mental health issues, coming from someone who was clinically diagnosed with depression when I was 17, was diagnosed with an eating disorder when I was 17. So everything that you're going to hear in this video is based off of my opinion, but I want to emphasize that it's an opinion from someone who has experienced what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? I'm not just pulling all of this out of my ass and coming out of pocket with this opinion. It's all based on what I've seen and just certain opinions that I've taken on because of what I've seen and from my own experiences. I started attending therapy when I was 17 years old. And as I said, I was clinically diagnosed with an eating disorder and with depression at that moment in my life. And I started attending therapy. And at the time, I was also seeing a nutritionist. And it was at this point that I would say I was at my absolute lowest. So I was at a very low point when my spiritual awakening began, but my mental health continued to decline even as this spiritual blossoming was taking place. And it seems very contradictory, and in reality, it kind of was. So I'm again having these really transcending experiences, but my mental health is on a steady decline. And at 17, like I said, I started attending therapy and I started, I guess, taking my mental health seriously. And I decided that I wanted to get better because I got to a place where I was just tired. And trigger warning, there was a period of my life before therapy. There was a certain month where I really was taking suicide ideation very seriously. So after that month, I knew that I needed to get help. Like, I knew that I wasn't okay. My family members knew that I wasn't okay. And it was just time for me to start actually taking my mental health seriously. So I did. And over the years of being in therapy and for the couple of months that I was working with a nutritionist, things did start to get better. I feel like there may be a bit of a misunderstanding that when you start therapy that like after that one session everything is going to be great again, and like, the sun is going to come out and like all of your problems are going to be solved. But in reality, attending therapy and really wanting to get to a place where you're mentally stable, it takes time. It takes a lot of time and effort on your part. And I hadn't really thought about that until I was immersed in it and I was attending regular therapy sessions weekly and having to try to verbalize all of what was going on in here. And over time, things did start to get better. I started to become more mentally stable. I started to recognize my unhealthy behavior patterns with food, with self-esteem, with relationships. I started to realize all of the ways that I've essentially been harming myself or had been harming myself, and all of the ways that I was just continuously giving myself the short end of the stick of life, essentially. And on this road to recovery and on this road of getting better, somewhere along the way, I came to the conclusion that as long as my spirituality was continuously growing and, like, plus I'm on this track of getting better, that all of my mental health issues are pretty much just gonna dissolve and they're not going to be a factor anymore, because I was getting better. I was spending time in therapy. I was learning healthier coping mechanisms, and my spirituality was continuing to expand, and I was continuously growing spiritually. I was realizing that I was clairaudient at that time. I was realizing that a lot of the messages that are communicated to me through my dreams have significant meaning. I was just having all of these deep spiritual realizations while I was getting better. And so I think that was what prompted me or allowed me to step into this misconception that my mental health was no longer going to be an issue for me, because spiritually I'm on the right track now and I have a better understanding of myself and my purpose here. So all of that stuff that I was experiencing, pre-therapy and pre-spiritual blossoming, all of that was just going to be a thing of the past. And I was very wrong. I remember the first time that a depressive episode reintroduced itself into my reality after a while of not experiencing one. And honestly, at the time, from what I can remember, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to deal with it, because especially in the past, pre-therapy, I didn't handle it. I didn't handle depressive episodes or anxious episodes. I pretty much just let the wave carry me wherever it wanted to, even if it led me to some really self-destructive places. So now that I have these healthier coping mechanisms and I'm attending therapy and I'm spiritually in better footing, I didn't know what I was supposed to do, because, like I said, I had the misconception that I would no longer have to deal with depressive episodes for weeks at a time, because, I was better and I was spiritually aligned now and I was in tune now. So all of that was supposed to be a thing of the past and nothing I had to worry about anymore. And when this wave, this very familiar wave of depression and anxiety reintroduced itself into my reality, I didn't know what to do. And there was a part of me, I think, that was frustrated with myself, because I was like, I've made all of this spiritual progress and I'm here again. Like, it sort of, in a way, made me feel like I was doing something wrong, as if having a depressive episode means that you're doing something wrong. And I just didn't know how to process it. And over time, I had to realize that just because I had grown spiritually, it didn't mean that all of the human aspects of my reality were suddenly going to go away. It didn't mean that childhood trauma and previous trauma was going to just magically go away and heal itself without me having to do anything. And so it was a struggle. That first depressive episode, after a while of not having one, was a very serious struggle. But I will say the difference between that episode and episodes in the past was that I was aware that I was having one. And I feel like that awareness is what allowed me to start building the foundation of becoming self-aware, of becoming aware of my triggers, of becoming aware when I'm starting to slip back into habits that I know are not healthy for me. And honestly, I feel like I would have to thank therapy and spirituality for that. Just having that self-awareness that, okay, I don't feel good, clearly, and I'm starting to feel the way that I did before, but I can't judge myself or chastise myself for feeling like this, because I'm supposed to have all this progress done. So I say all of that to say that I believe that the main reason why I want to make this video is because I don't really see mental health, just mental health, without any sort of attachment to spirituality or any sort of spiritual justification connected to it. I don't really see just mental health talked about as often in the spiritual community as I feel like it should be. Especially in the past when I was really immersed in spiritual YouTube channels and spiritual Tumblr pages, and when I was just really consuming a lot of spiritual content from other content creators, I feel like whenever mental health was brought up, specifically depression, it was always linked to, I don't really know the word that I want to use, and I don't really know how to describe it, but I feel like it was always linked to a spiritual reason as to why you were depressed. Like, you couldn't be experiencing depression or anxiety without a spiritual misalignment being the reason for it. And as someone, as I said, who has experienced depression and anxiety for most of her life on a very deep and intense level at times, I found that concept and that perpetuated notion to be completely false, and to spread a false narrative that if you're experiencing depression or anxiety or any other mental health issue, that it's because of some spiritual misalignment on your part. And while there is a part of me that can understand where this conclusion can come from, there is a part of me that can understand why they would perpetuate this idea and push this idea. The the part of me, the bigger part of me that has experienced it, knows that there are other people out there who are like me, who have all of these, really amazing spiritual experiences, and, are very in tune with themselves and with the energies around them, but still have mental health issues and struggle with their mental health at times. And I don't think it's helpful or progressive in any way to essentially tell a person that the reason why you're experiencing these mental health problems is because you're misaligned, or you're not in tune, or spiritually you're not as aware of yourself as you thought you were. And I think these concepts are always pushed by people who haven't necessarily experienced it themselves. And I think that's where the problem comes in. Because while I believe that everyone is entitled to their opinion, I do think there are certain topics that are more valuable when discussed when coming from people who have experienced them. So I would rather talk about depression with someone who has had experience with it than someone who hasn't. Just like I would prefer to talk about eating disorders with someone who has experienced it rather than someone who hasn't. And that isn't because, like I said, I don't believe that they shouldn't have an opinion because they haven't experienced it. It's just there's a level of relativity that can be exchanged when you know that the person you're speaking with has experienced it as well, that I don't think is there when someone hasn't had the personal experience with it. And that's just my opinion. So I feel like whenever mental health is talked about in the spiritual community, it's always in this condescending tone coming from people who, again, have not experienced it. And that condescending nature comes from, in a way, invalidating a person's experience in exchange for spiritual reasons as to why they're experiencing it, rather than just, listening to the individual and being there for the individual in their time of need until they can get back on their own feet and get back in tune and, whatever they feel is the reason for it. Recently, I experienced a depressive episode. And I guess you could say technically I'm still in it. As I said, I'm someone who knows my triggers in the sense that I know when I'm starting to slip back into an episode. I'll call it that. I notice when my sleep pattern changes. I start not sleeping whenever I'm not feeling okay internally. My diet may change, as in I may be eating a lot or I may be eating very little. I may be feeling a lot of anxiety that's not really addressed, and I'm just feeling constantly overwhelmed and on edge. And these are just some of my personal symptoms that I've really started to notice over the years on this track of feeling better. And I started to notice it about 2 weeks ago. And it wasn't until I was having a conversation with someone that I realized that, oh, I've been anxious for like an entire month and I haven't really addressed it. And so slowly my energy just started draining, and I realized that I hadn't been feeling good. And so I sat in that energy and I just felt it for what it was. And I acknowledged that I was having another depressive episode. And if I were to go by what I feel like is pushed so often in the spiritual community about mental health, about it being some sort of reflection of any sort of misalignment, I would have likely chastised myself for feeling that way and started pushing myself to meditate so I could figure out what was going on, or doing readings for myself so I could figure out what was wrong, instead of just being in that energy the way I needed to be in order for me to slowly and organically come out of it as I always do. But if I were following, like I said, that pushed narrative that the reason why you're having this depressive or anxiety episode is because spiritually you're not aligned, and like you need to align your chakras or some bullshit like that, like I wouldn't have allowed myself to just feel how I felt. And at the time I felt like shit. And I feel like we don't say that often enough in the spiritual community because we're always trying to put on this face that everything is okay and that everything is in tune and that we're doing great. And it's not always like that. And that was actually a message that came through for me while I was in that depressive episode, is that very often in the spiritual community, I feel like we only show the mountaintops. We only show the moments where we have seen a manifestation come to fruition, when we are really sensitive to the energy around us and we're able to channel consistently. We only really show the moments that look good. But I feel like it's rare that we express the moments of humanity. I feel like the humanity aspect of this spiritual reality gets neglected so often in the spiritual community, and then leaves people with mental health issues, as we've been talking about, regardless of what they are and what the specific details of them are. Those individuals, I feel like, end up feeling like, okay, well, I'm seeing all of these people who are achieving all of these things, and the universe seems to really be looking out for them. So like, what am I doing wrong that I feel this way? And I don't think that's something that we need to be allowing to even be a thought that crosses people's minds in the spiritual community. We need to start talking about the humanity aspect of life. I feel like very often it's not talked about that we are human. We have human thoughts, we have a human ego, we have human behavior, we have human past. As in, we have childhoods that may have been really painful. We have experiences that are very offensive and very painful for us that we need to reflect back on. And I don't want all of these things, all of these very human things, to just feel bad sometimes and to not know what the fuck is going on sometimes and to not be confident sometimes. I don't want them to get swept up in the umbrella, the general umbrella of, well, this is just a part of your shadow work and you need to fix it and then you'll be fine. I don't necessarily like that approach either, because in a way it also feels like bypassing and neglecting. Along my spiritual journey, I have had to be okay with not being okay. I have had to come to my own personal understanding that I'm not going to feel good all the time. I'm not going to feel spiritually aligned all the time. I'm not going to be channeling all of the time. And to be okay with that and to not put any sort of expectation on myself that because I'm aware that I'm this spiritual being, that I need to be spiritual all the time, that I need to be in alignment all the time, that I need to be doing this a certain way and feeling this certain way all the time because that's, the true reflection that I'm a spiritual being. And I had to come, like I said, to my own personal conclusion that my spirituality is innately going to be tied with my human reality as well. There's no way it can't be. As long as I'm in this human vessel, there are going to be human things that I deal with. And one of those human things that I deal with is my mental health. And I'm aware of where it comes from. That's a part of doing the inner healing. I'm aware of my triggers. I am aware of why I feel the way I feel at times, and other times I don't. Sometimes I just start feeling like shit and I don't know why, and it takes me a while to process what's actually going on in here so I can understand and then, start the process of recovery and healing if that's necessary. But I don't want other people who have not gotten to that place yet and are on their spiritual journey and are really immersing themselves in the community to feel like, as I said, that there's something wrong with them when the human side of them really starts to come to the forefront and they are feeling anxious and they're feeling worried and they're feeling concerned or they're feeling depressed or they're feeling insecure. And I don't want them to try to either justify why they feel that way through a spiritual reason or to try to bypass why they feel that way through a spiritual reason. Not everything has to be looked at through a spiritual aesthetic lens. Sometimes things just need to be looked at as face value. Sometimes things just need to be looked at as they are without trying to, well, I feel this way because this chakra is misaligned and this planet is this, you know what I mean? Not to say that, those reasons are invalid, but I don't want those to be the immediate conclusions that people jump to when old habits start to come up, when old feelings start to resurface, when something that was painful comes up again and you just need to cry it out. You need to vent it out. Whatever needs to be done at that moment in time, I don't want that to be neglected for some spiritual explanation that can easily, as I said, be used as a bypass for what's actually going on. And being honest, I was one of those individuals pre-therapy. Like, I thought that because I was aware of my spirituality, and as I said, I was having all of these spiritual experiences, that naturally everything would just fix itself, that I don't need to go to therapy. Like, I meditate every day. Like, I talk to my spirit guides consistently. Like, I don't therapy. Like, I don't need to talk to anyone about this. Like, I'm fine. But as I mentioned earlier, I was having all of these really transcending experiences, but my mental health was on a steady decline because I wasn't acknowledging that human aspect of me. I wasn't acknowledging the depression and the anxiety and the eating disorder for what they were. I was trying to use spirituality as a way to just kind of mask everything and cover up everything. So as long as I'm spiritually okay, then everything happening in here doesn't matter as much. And like I said, until I got to that point, to that certain month where suicidal ideation was really at the forefront of my mind, did I realize, like, oh, yeah, I'm meditating every day, but I'm not okay. And it took a lot for me to really acknowledge that. And as I've been saying, make the decision like, okay, I need to take myself seriously. Sure, I can meditate every day. Sure, I can speak to my spirit guides every day. I love that they're here with me. I love that they want to help me and, guide me along this journey. But there are just some things that need to be looked at from a human perspective. And I feel like mental health is one of those things that very often it's not looked at the way I feel like it should be looked at or talked about in the spiritual community, because I feel like there's this idea that the two can't coexist together, that you can't have depression and be spiritual, that you can't have anxiety and be spiritual. And especially the anxiety one, because I know so often it's perpetuated that, well, anxiety is just being too far in the future, or, and depression is like being too in the past. And it's like, okay, cool, but like sometimes depression is literally just you don't feel good where you are in the present. And sometimes you know why, and sometimes you don't. And I feel like exploring the realities of mental health, aside from spirituality, is what will help you really decipher what's going on so you can better your life, so you can come to the conclusions that you need to come to, so you can start taking the steps to feel better that are practical and don't, you need to align your chakras, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I feel like this was more of a rant video than anything, and some of it may be coherent, some of it may not, but I don't know. I want to start creating a space on this page and on my Instagram where we can start talking about mental health and not completely in the context of spirituality. Do I think they can be intertwined? Yes, I do. Were they intertwined for me? A little bit, but there was a lot more to it that I needed a professional for, that I needed someone who was trained in a lot of what I had experienced to help me navigate and get to a place where I was able to cope on my own. And so I just want to start talking about mental health in a general sense and in a personal sense on my pages. So I don't know, I can be someone that someone out there can relate to and be like, you know what, I fucking feel her. Like, I wish I had someone making videos like these when I was really starting to do all my research and stuff on spirituality. Because, like I said, everything that I found just kind of came to the conclusion of, well, there's something misaligned and there's something wrong with you and you're not meditating enough and it's the food you're eating and that's the reason why you're not feeling okay. And it's like, yeah, sure, just completely bypass that person's experiences and their personality and what they're currently going through for chakra misalignment. And also, as someone who grew up in a religious environment where mental health was not talked about at all and was easily swept under the God will fix it rug if you pray about it, I this is something that I have been very passionate about. And like I said, because I feel like it's been bypassed very often in the spiritual community, I want to, I guess, create the discussion. Even if these videos that I plan on making in the future, maybe I'll talk about the eating disorder because I know that's also something that's not addressed as often, especially in communities of color. If I can just, be of assistance to one person and make one person feel less like, okay, like I'm not crazy, like I'm not dealing with this by myself, like there are other people who are in the spiritual community who genuinely deal with mental health issues and with anxiety and with depression and with anything else that falls under that category, then I feel like I've done the right thing. And I feel like I've helped change the trajectory that someone had been on prior to coming across this video or any of the other videos that I want to make in the future. So even if this was a ramble, if you got something out of it, feel free to let me know in the comment section, or you could just leave a like on this video letting me know that you enjoyed watching me rant for like 20 to 30 minutes. And if you would like to purchase my book or check out my journals or order a reading from me, all of those links will be in the description. And yeah, I thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope you have a really good rest of your day.